We are at Southwest Audio Fest 2025. I'm Ron Resnick. If you enjoyed this interview, kindly click like and subscribe to my What's Best Forum YouTube channel. Very happy to be joined again by Florian Wiegand, founder and designer at Clarisys Audio. Great to see you again.
Well, thank you very much.
You're showing this show the newest version of the studio speaker.
Correct.
Please tell us, what are the improvements in structural rigidity that we are looking at here?
So, as you can see, we're showing you the back of the speaker without the dust cover on. And it's actually a trickle-down version of our $800,000 atrium system. So the entire speaker is completely made out of aluminum. And it's a completely modular build, which is very unique in the planar speaker world. Nobody else does this. So as you can see, this is the magnet grid, top to bottom. It is completely removable. You can take it away. You can also change the distance of the magnet grid to the driver itself, and thereby actually increasing efficiency or increasing the maximum panel movement that the system has to have an increased output. If you take away this magnet grid, you're still left with the ribbon bass driver inside this modular frame. Now, why is that important? Let's say you buy the speaker and you have a bunch of happy cats, and one of the cats damages this beautiful ribbon. Normally, you would have to send the speaker back to the factory to get a new ribbon installed. Well, in this case, we will ship you a new ribbon installed in a frame like this. And you can simply install it like a picture frame, so it's easier to service in the field. Now, in this version, of course, the structural rigidity is higher. If you're a panel speaker guy, you'll notice that most alternative offerings on panels, they're very floppy. If you hit them, they move. This is actually very bad from a design perspective, because you only want the panel to move and not the speaker, because you lose kinetic energy. So we are aiming for a very high structural rigidity of the speaker, and we achieve it with this modular build, and we're also getting many other technical advances that we did not get as much in the previous versions of the speaker. This is a new standard for Clarisys Audio, so no matter if you buy a Piccolo, a Minuet, a Studio Plus, or any of the other models, you're getting the exact same build quality and structural engineering. And as you earlier, everybody calls me the designer, but the truth of the matter is that our mechanical head engineer is called Val. And we have many people at Clarisys Audio working on this design. I'm responsible primarily for the acoustics, the tuning, and the crossover. But kudos goes out to Bao for this incredible mechanical engineering.
Approximately how heavy is the speaker now with this new aluminum frame?
This is approximately, I'm not completely off on conversion, about 500 pounds. Mm-hmm. That's of course per speaker. They ship fully assembled in flight cases, so you stand up the box, pull out the speaker, and you're good to go.
You mentioned that the ribbon can be adjusted depending if somebody wants to emphasize efficiency or not.
Yes.
What is the difference in sound as you change the different positions?
Well, the difference in sound is non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
It is the same sound. The only question is how loud can you play the system and how much power do you need. Now, we don't recommend that the customer does this in their own home, but depending, if you tell us in advance for what kind of amplification you have, we can recommend a distance for you. Now, of course, you can just order the standard distance, which means anything above 50 watts per channel will be good enough for the room size specified by the speaker. If you have a smaller amplifier, then we can close this magnetic gap and increase the efficiency.
What is the range of efficiency that can be achieved?
So we go from about 89 dB to about 94 dB.
Really? So this can get up to 94 dB now?
Yes.
Wow. I know that you've changed the material of the drivers themselves versus earlier generations. Tell us about that.
If you look at the mid-range driver right here, it's actually two drivers. There are two pure aluminum ribbons, and I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but you can see they're essentially massless. So the previous editions had a Kapton back and then aluminum foil traces up and down. And this is already a very excellent driver, but if you want to make it lighter, you have to remove the Kapton and make it a single trace. Now the downfall here is that, of course, it's essentially a dead short. So the static impedance of this driver right here is about 0.15 ohms, which would kill any normal amplifier. Now, we do use custom transformers designed by Lundal in Sweden to convert this low impedance to 4 ohms. So the amplifier will always see a 4 ohm resistance, and that allows us to use this driver in all models starting from the Studio Plus.
What is the difference in sound between the prior generation that doesn't use the transformers and this generation, which uses the transformers to achieve a flat 4 ohm impedance?
Speed is about 1/3 to 1/4 of the weight of the original driver. So you will hear more information, more resolution, but not in the term of a bling-bling artifact. But what you hear is unforced resolution. So it's a more natural sounding driver. It never gets sharp. It never annoys you. And it is extremely linear within its frequency band. So you have a very open sound, a very fast sound, very natural sound. And since this driver is actually not double-sided, but there are 2 individual ribbons which are suspended back to back and playing in parallel, you can start this ribbon at 220 Hertz at -6 dB. So essentially about 90% of all the information you hear on the speaker is being played by this ribbon module right here.
So that is the crossover frequency now down to about 220?
At -6 dB, the crossover point is 550 Hertz, and the crossover is still first order 6 dB. So we have one inductor for the bass panel, we have one capacitor on the mid-range element, and then the transformer, of course, between the driver and this capacitor. But all the crossover boxes have 3 components, and that's it. Yeah.
And from whom are you sourcing the inductor, the capacitor?
So the inductors we make ourselves. They're air core inductors. And the capacitors we get from Johnson. We use Johnson Superior, red label, I guess you would call them. And the transformers are custom made for us at Lundal. And Lundal will also show with us at the upcoming Munich show, by the way. And one can actually learn how the transformers are made and how the transformers are custom built also for our speakers.
Why do you like the Janssen capacitor rather than, say, Mundorf or Newland?
It's interesting. We tried the Newland capacitors on the big atrium system, and it's a very fine product. The question really comes from how much better is that capacitor in contrast to, let's say, a Johnson Superior, and what's the cost-performance ratio. So if you get an atrium system, then yes, the passive crossover, if you choose to have one, is completely made from dual and crossover parts. But if I were to install dual and crossover components on a speaker like this, then the retail price would probably increase to about 10 to 12,000, simply because of the parts cost. And so it's not really feasible to do that. The Mundorf has several different series. For example, I find the black series, the gold, silver, and oil, to me is a bit too aggressive. I prefer their Mundorf Evolution series. That's actually a fantastic value and a great performing product. We have voiced our speakers using Johnson capacitors. We have done this now since 3 years, and we have had great success with them. They're reliable, the measured tolerances are also always in line with what they specify, and so we have chosen to stick with them because it has been very successful for us.
You had mentioned that if there's an issue with a ribbon, that the entire frame assembly is field replaceable.
Yes.
What is the method of connection between the ribbon and the structure? Is it a quick disconnect kind of thing, or what is the nature of that connector?
All of our connections are clamped. So you essentially have 2 copper pieces, in the middle you have the foil, and then we have screws that put on the pressure points and connect those 2 materials together. We make our own binding posts. We do not source them. We custom make them. They are made out of pure copper, and all of the connections are simply clamped on. If you want to remove one of these connectors, it's about a 30-second job. You unscrew 2 screws and remove the ribbon out of it. The entire driver assembly is being held up by these screws. So you have 1 up here, 2 here, 4, 6, 8, so about 16 screws in total. Take off the magnet grid, take out the panel, install a new panel, make the connections in about 30 seconds, and you're good to go.
I know over the course of time you've used a variety of different solid-state amplifiers and different tube amplifiers on the speakers. What is your favorite these days? What are you enjoying most?
For solid state, it's very clearly Solution Audio 7 Series. That's our benchmark product. Solution Audio also uses our auditorium speakers in their factory, also for testing their products. And for tube amps, we have done various. We like Jadi, for example, very much. We also worked with conversion audio in the past, but I found our new partner both for quality, service, and performance in VAC audio. So we use VAC now instead of the previous mentioned brands.
What's the next new product we should expect from Clarisys?
Well, actually 2 models. Let me not give it away totally, but let's say you have a beautiful apartment in New York City, and you don't want all of these, wonderful boxes of amplification, preamplifiers, etc., and you have just the wish to experience music through a ribbon speaker without having the complexity. We have a solution for that in Munich. The other product we are announcing is a model between the Studio Plus and the Auditorium, because right now we have a price difference of about $70,000, which is a very large gap. We have many customers that say we want the image height of an Auditorium, but the price range is just simply out of reach for them. So we're introducing about a 6-foot tall 4-chassis ribbon speaker called the Aria, which is going to also launch in Munich, and that's going to be around below the $100,000 a pair mark. And we're very excited to bring the Atrium technology down to the different ranges of our products. And if you look at our product selection now, we go from $20,000 a pair up to about $151,000 a pair, excluding the Atrium system. So we really have a product for every price range. And what's actually more critical to me is that the build quality on all of our models are exactly the same standard. So if you buy a $800,000 Atrium system, the build quality is exactly the same as on a Piccolo for $20,000 a pair. The reason why these price differences come into play is simply for the sheer amount of material used, the scale, the amount of drivers, plus of course the time it takes to build these speakers.
So the Aria will be a 4-column system, so the mid-range tweeter, will that be the swivel method inherited from the Atrium?
Yes. No, it will not swivel on its own base, but of course being a separate element, you can adjust it on the feet. There are several advantages from separating these units. So on a typical panel speaker, which is not built as rigidly as this, for example, the vibration caused by the bass panel always transfer to the mid-range and treble element. So when you place bass-heavy tracks, then you can see the mid-range and treble element actually move, creating a sound of its own, although very, very low in resonance frequencies or inaudible, but you can still hear them. Now, if you have very heavy bass tracks and voicing on top of that, you get intermodulation of the drivers. So there are several ways to, let's say, minimize this effect. One is you really spend a lot of time and money into the build quality of the product to make it very rigid, or you install a blockage barrier so that the sound pressure doesn't transfer to the other drivers. Now ideally, you can perfect this by separating them physically from each other. And that's what we did on the Atrium, and we're also going to do on the Aria.
Will the Aria have an option for a standalone subwoofer tower like the Atrium does, like a mini subwoofer system?
We do actually already offer a standalone ribbon subwoofers from the Atrium system. And we are actually thinking about bringing it down in size so that an auditorium customer, for example, can also buy additional subwoofer towers. However, all of our speakers are truly full range, and none of our customers use subwoofers with our speakers, which I guess you can do it technically, but sonically I don't really see the advantage of doing that right now. But yes, that is an offer that's coming up for those who just want more.
What is the design or sonic reason for the woofer tower in the Atrium and the Aria being that sail shape, whereas the subwoofer tower is back to the trapezoid shape?
It's actually not a trapezoid shape, but it's difficult to see. To show it here on this speaker, you have the slanted side is here. the infrasonic subwoofer on the atrium actually has a slanted side on the left and also a slanted side on the right. Now, depending on the geometry of the panel, you can favor certain amounts of frequencies. And for the infrasonic frequencies, we found out that actually the trapezoidal shape on both sides increases the really low bass performance output. However, it is not as good in the midband, but obviously as an infrasonic subwoofer, it's never going to play it with the midband. So the advantages, especially of the curved design, is that we don't have any static resonances on the panel. So a rectangular panel, let's say on a typical planar speaker that you can buy today, the speaker panel is attached to all four sides of the frame, and when it moves, it always bends around the corners and the edges. Some manufacturers then place little plastic pucks on the panel to break up these resonance nodes on the panel. That's, let's say, the most affordable way to design a panel speaker. If your consideration is not a budget, but pure from a performance perspective, then you design the panel to have the least amount of resonances and the least amount of parallel geometries on the panel. And if you carefully look on a piccolo or an atrium, you will see that actually the top part is wider than the bottom part, and then you have the sail as well. So we truly don't have any parallel surfaces. It's more expensive to build, but it's better performance technically.
Well, thank you, Florian. Great to see you again, and thank you for explaining the updates to the design.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ron.
My pleasure.
Broke down at home, too tired to moan. When I heard somebody calling my name, but there was nobody there. When I heard somebody calling my name, saying ain't no need.
You old fish, savage foul, scolded up and scolded down.
Heard somebody calling my name, saying there ain't no need to be ashamed, ain't no need to be ashamed. I found